Welcome to Modern Tactical Shooting. Now in this video I'll be covering the slide lock or the emergency reload. Now a lot of tactical shooting instructors, they advocate when the gun is empty, bringing it back into your workspace. I'm going to tell you why this is wrong. While it does have merit, it only applies in one specific situation. For this video, I'm going to recommend how I perform an emergency reload, which is a lot more ergonomic, has less wasted movement, and as a result is a lot faster. So let's go. So before I cover reloads, you may have noticed the studio has changed behind me. I was working out of my garage. Now I've switched to a room in a house. It's not where I want it yet. It's a work in progress, but I'll get there in the next few videos. Now back to reloads. Talking about the workspace reload, why I don't like it. It's actually been confused as a team technique, confused as an individual technique. What do I mean by that? It's a very popular technique taught in the military because in the military, where you work generally as a member of a team. And in CQB, you don't have a lot of room. So the workspace reload brings the gun up into your workspace, super close to your body. So when you're moving around that team, especially in CQB, there's no danger of flagging anybody or muzzling anybody if you use a more conventional reload. A workspace reload brings the pistol in tight, keeps the muzzle clear of your teammates, so while you're manipulating your gun around in the stack, there's no chance of flagging. It's not the fastest reload out there. In fact, it's probably one of the slowest. Why? Because the distance you bring the pistol into your workspace, that's the same distance you have to drive the gun out after you reload, and that's a lot of wasted movement bringing the gun in and back out. That's wasted time. That's time you're giving to a threat if you're in a gunfight by yourself, and that's time you're wasting if you're in the middle of a match, bringing the gun all the way in, all the way out. I'm going to cover my reload, which is a lot more ergonomic, has less wasted movement, and I think it's perfect for those who, again, could be facing threats as an individual, like many of us are, or the reload that I use in the match. It's the same reload, and I'm going to get into it right now. So the key to performing a fast reload, I think, is minimizing excessive movement, or in the case of the pistol reload, minimizing any excessive distance you're bringing the pistol in, and then having to drive the pistol back out. So how do I gauge that distance? Because you do need to bring the pistol in some and rotate it just slightly to see the opening in the magazine well, to seat your magazine. So the technique I used to determine the proper distance, I call it popping the elbow or driving the elbow, and that's where I just drive my elbow till it makes contact with my midsection, and that sets me up for the proper distance to, one, see the opening of the magazine well, and it keeps my front sight up in my peripheral between myself and the threat, so I could be scanning around, and because I drive it down to the same spot every time, it's repeatable. So I call it the elbow pop, just for lack of a better term or lack of a better name. Two-hand grip, and I pop it down. And by popping it down hard, it helps eject that spent magazine. I don't whip it around, and I don't turn it over excessively because mags will stick. But it is repeatable, popping it down to that same spot every time. That's my technique, the elbow pop to the midsection. So I'll go through it and I'll talk through it. Of course, I'm using an empty gun, empty mag. And anytime you're doing practice, you should be using dummy rounds. So I'll be using dummy rounds. So let me talk through the elbow pop method. So I'm shooting, my gun goes empty. I drive my elbow down till it makes contact with my midsection. Simultaneously, support hands going to the mag, and I'm hitting that magazine release. Index the magazine with your index finger, bullets facing the front. My focal point is still looking around up for any threats. And the only time I do a focal shift to the magazine well is just before it makes contact to make sure it's lined up. And as soon as I feel my index finger hit that magazine well, focal shift goes back up looking for threats. Seat the magazine, simultaneously rolling the gun over. Now to put the gun back into battery, ever since I switched to Glock, I use a support hand thumb on the slide stop or slide release lever. I used to use my firing hand thumb to depress the slide stop lever, but I found with Glock, I don't have to roll the gun over at all if I use my support hand thumb. And as I get my grip, my thumb naturally lines up so I can put the gun into battery and simultaneously push it out and get ready for that next shot. Now, there are other techniques of putting the gun into battery, which I'll cover here in a little bit, but that's the breakdown of my elbow pop method for the reload. I'll do a medium and a fast dry fire, and we'll cut to some range video of me hitting it at the range. All right, let's do a medium speed reload. Nice and smooth. And I'll set up for a fast. All right, let's go for a fast under 2 seconds. And got it in time. All right, let's cut to the range for some live fire demos doing my elbow pop method. Now, when it comes to practicing reloads, while I am looking for speed, I do not get hung up on doing one reload once and trying to get as fast as I can. I would rather work on reloading on the move. To me, that's a lot more valuable skill to have, because think about it, in a tactical scenario, if your gun goes dry, do you really just want to stand there and do a slide lock reload? No, you should be moving to cover or moving somewhere, move off the X while you're doing a reload. And in a gun match, you don't want to do what's known as a flat-footed reload, meaning you shoot a bunch of targets, your gun goes empty, and you're wasting time standing in that one spot trying to reload before you can move on to the next set of targets. So I put more weight on being able to reload on the move than I do sitting there and just doing blazing fast one reload ones in a static position. Now, there's another type of reload I want to cover in this video. I'm going to save the tactical reload where you're changing out mags. I'm going to save that for a later video, but I do want to talk about the speed reload. Now, the speed reload is a competition shooting technique only. It's a game technique, and that is you're out shooting a course of fire, and at some point in the course of fire, you're ejecting a magazine that has rounds in it onto the ground, forgetting about it, and putting in a fresh mag. In a stage or course of fire, it may behoove you to jettison that half-full mag and put in a fresh mag, so you don't run into an instance of having to do, again, a flat-footed reload. You're faced with targets, and halfway through shooting those targets, your gun goes empty. While you're moving to that next set of targets, you can do a speed reload, top off, so you're doing two things at once. So when you come into that new target array, you have a full mag in your weapon. Again, it's a straight gamer technique, but you're going to see it out in 2-gun. You're going to see it in 3-gun matches. So it's a skill to have. And if you're into shooting, it's something you should be familiar with. Yes, it has 0 tactical value, but as you'll see in some of these match clips here, I do a speed reload, so when I come into other target arrays in the course of fire, I don't have to sit there and waste time doing a complete slide lock reload.
You stand by. Turn it down. Turn it down. There you go.
Real quick, I want to mention these Raptor adapter plates from Guardian Warrior Solutions. What these allow you to do is take pouches that have, say, screw-on belt attachments, like, say, Blade Tech Lock clips, and convert them to being able to mount them on MOLLE, or vice versa, MOLLE this through a MOLLE pouch, and then being able to add on different belt attachment methods to it. So pretty handy adapters. You can get creative with these. I've even doubled 2 up, and I've changed the angle on this ATS Tactical Gear IFAK pouch. It was a vertical pouch with the opening to the top. I paired 2 of these up, I changed the angle, and I mounted now horizontal on this ATS war belt, which puts it more in line the way I like it, and better access to the pouch. So you can get creative with these. Use a little carbon fiber clips, screw holes on one side, and a MOLLE I would say clip on the other, and then the screws attaches to the pouch, and then you can MOLLE it through, or again vice versa, convert a MOLLE pouch to use some other attachment method. So super handy little adapters. I've been playing with these for about 5 months now. I really dig them, and I think they're a cool piece of kit, really allowing you to have some modularity to your pouches. So if you end up with a MOLLE pouch, you're not stuck with just being able to use that solely for a MOLLE, or again, vice versa. These adapters will work both ways, going from MOLLE to another clip style system if it screws on, or vice versa. So again, these are Raptor adapter plates from Guardian Warrior Solutions. I'm going to put a link down in the description. That's guardianwarriorsolutions.com. All right, so you may have noticed when I talked about getting the slide back into battery, I use my support hand thumb to activate the slide stop or slide release lever. Now, there are many tactical instructors out there that say under stress, you're going to have some loss of fine motor skills, fine motor control, and trying to rely on hitting the slide release button could be a deficit to your life because you won't have the fine motor skills to hit that button. I think that argument is complete drivel, and I think it's way overblown in the tactical shooting community. And more often than not, the tactical instructors that are pushing for gross motor movements to manipulate the slide because you're going to have loss of fine motor control, chances are they've never been in a firefight themselves, and they're just repeating it because it sounds tactical cool or tacti-cool. In reality, if you have training, more often than not, you're going to fall back on your training. You might not even remember doing it. I've served in combat with a lot of first-time Green Berets that their first action was with me out in the missions, and I never saw anybody revert to being a caveman or a window licker and not been able to manipulate the controls on their firearm. More often than not, they'll go into automatic mode and they won't even remember doing things. Now, of course, if you have zero training, you could have some loss of fine motor control. The first time I was ever in a firefight, I had some auditory exclusion and I had some tunnel vision. For lack of a better term, it's really hyper-focus on the threat, but I still was able to manipulate everything on my gun. And for those that do advocate that you're going to have loss of fine motor skills and you should manipulate the slide to get the gun back into battery, they're only applying it to the slide lock lever. For some reason, it doesn't get applied to the magazine release. So people have no problem hitting the mag release button, but for some reason, we can't hit that button that's not even half an inch away. We have to rely on gross motor movements for that. I don't buy that argument. If you can hit your magazine release, you can hit the slide stop lever with your support or firing hand thumb. And to add to my argument why I think it's complete drivel, it takes fine motor skills to manipulate the trigger to get precise shots on target. And there's plenty of cases of shooters, the first time they've ever faced a threat, being able to make some great hits on target. Tons of examples out there, so people are able to maintain some fine motor control. Again, I think it's completely overblown. Now, if you are into manipulating the slide to get the gun into battery, at least don't do the hand over the slide. This is massive waste of time and movement. If anything, I do a rollover and a pinch. I used to reload that way all the time, whether you pinch at the front or pinch at the back of the slide, either one. It's less movement because you insert your mag, roll the gun over, pinch and release, and at least you can get a two-hand grip and push the gun back out. So rolling the gun over, and it's called a slingshot in some circles. I do prefer that technique, again, over this. I think this technique is a waste of time. And again, the loss of fine motor skills when you're faced with a threat may apply to somebody with zero training, but if you had training, I think more often than not, you're going to fall back on your training because that's what your mind has been programmed to do. All right, so there it is, my thoughts on reloading and my popping the elbow technique for getting the gun back into action during a slide lock reload. Now, are there other reloading techniques out there? Of course there are, but a lot of them are based on the gun design. And I find my elbow driving technique works well for guns that have a standard or only slightly flared magwell. There are shooters out there that barely roll the gun and barely bring it back. But a lot of them are able to do that because they have very extended or flared magazine wells where they don't need to turn the gun over at all to find it. Nothing wrong with that. There are guns out there that have it, but my technique works and is very repeatable, again, for your standard magazine wells, and I find it works great for both competition and tactical shooting. But as always, to get good with any technique takes practice. And a major part of my practice is actually dry firing, working with a timer or working without a timer, either one. Just as boxers use shadow boxing as a major tool to get good, I think dry firing is key, and it's something you can do really in any setting. And again, you should always be working out with dummy rounds. But all in all, that's my thoughts on reloading, my technique for reloads. And as always, enough watching me. Go get your dry fire on, hit the range, practice your reloads, and as always, I'm Jeff Gerwich. Thanks for watching.
Burn it down.